Well, welcome. On behalf of Dean Karen Rothenberg, my faculty colleagues, and our entire law school community here at the University of Maryland School of Law, I'd like to welcome you here for this important conference. My name is Michael Van Alstyne. I'm the Associate Dean for Research and Faculty Development. I work most closely with the kinds of issues that you will be looking at over the coming days. I wanted to wish you very much, and I hope you feel very welcome here at the University of Maryland. We are quite pleased with our facilities here, both structural and technological. And I also wanted to thank John Mayer and his staff, Barbara Gontram, my colleague on the faculty and the director of our law library, for their very hard work, for their dedication, and simply for the amount of time and effort they put into organizing this quite substantial conference. I urge you all to take a moment and express your thanks as well. We all know how much work can go into one of these events, so thank you very much for your hard work here. Finally, I wish you all the best of success. I wish you an enriching and enlightening conference so that we all can go back to our own institutions and make them a better place for our colleagues, for our students, and for our broader communities. So in short, I wish you the best of success and a very enjoyable time in this beautiful weather and this beautiful facility. And now I'll ask John Mayer to come up and take things from here. Thank you.
In case it isn't obvious, welcome to the 18th Annual Conference for Law School Computing. Elvis followed by Alice Cooper seemed appropriate. My name is John Mayer. I'm the Executive Director of CALI, and I'm here to welcome you and to handle housekeeping. So let me go through some housekeeping things very quickly. If you are not attending the dinner tonight, and you have a ticket, please return your ticket back to the registration desk, because that's how we keep an absolute accurate count. All right, that's just like a little counter for us. If you are not attending the dinner tonight and you have one of those tickets, just give it back to us. All right? If you don't know, just hang on to it. That's okay. The dinner is at the aquarium. Walking is encouraged. We have a limited number of buses, but it's only a 10, 15, 20-minute max walk. And it looks like it's going to be a beautiful day, so walking is encouraged for that, because we didn't get enough buses for everybody because we assumed that you would be walking there. There are sign-ups for dine-arounds for people planning to go to dinner together on Friday evening at the registration desk, all right? So there's like lists of restaurants and people who want to sign up to go to dinner together. I'm supposed to mention that there are tours of the law school library and tech tours, of course, tech tours. Did we like invent tech tours with this conference or something? It's like, ooh, I want to see your raised floors. I want to see your data closets. There are tours. There are tours let me think. I think they're Friday, right? They're tomorrow, because I'm looking at Thursday and I don't see them. So they're tomorrow at noon, which means you've got a half hour to get some lunch and then go meet. The rest of the information is on the agenda. Birds of a feather. If you want to convene a Birds of a Feather session, and a Birds of a Feather are people who have, hold on a second. Yeah? Oh, yeah. I'll remind them. All right, thanks. Don't forget to turn off your cell phones, because it's really annoying when you get cell phones in the middle of presentations. Thanks, Elmer. So if you want to convene a Birds of a Feather session, there's sign-up boards in the Krongard or the registration room. That's where you picked up all of your stuff. Basically, you write down your name and a topic, and if enough people show interest, then when you convene in the Birds of a Feather room, then basically it's up to you to decide how what gets said in that session. There are no speakers in that session, right? Last year we did Birds of a Feather session, and on the conference evaluations I got some complaints saying, I went to the session and the speaker didn't show up. And it's like, that's the idea. There is no speaker. It's an unconference or an unsession, I guess. All right, at the end of the day on Friday, we'll have typed lists of the BOF sessions that have been suggested and the people that will be on them at the registration desk. Next, DrupalFest, sold out. So if you were planning on wandering in on DrupalFest, but you didn't tell Elmer, that's a bad idea. Turn off that damn phone. That's a bad idea because there isn't enough room. We're sorry, it got too popular. All right? The butterflies. You all notice you have butterflies. You all got the butterflies, transformation, caterpillars, right? Oh, is that what you were trying to say? We all have butterflies on your name badges, right? And so here's the deal. There's 12 different butterflies. And as a way to get you to mix up, at lunch today, you can only eat with people who have the same butterfly as you. And tomorrow, you can only eat with people who don't have the same butterflies as you. Or just, never mind, right? All right, speakers. Speakers of, this is out to all the speakers. There are wireless lav mics in the room. Please put them on and use them, even if the room is small and you can project like I can, even in a big room. We still need you to use the mics because that's what gets fed in for the recordings for the podcast, all right? The raffle. Wow, we're giving away a Wii, and I think nobody on the CALI Board of Directors is going to win this year. We're giving away a Wii and a Kindle and a couple of iPods, including an 8-gig iPod Nano provided to us by Aspen and an iPod Nano provided by ExamSoft. Sorry, I did that wrong. Aspen's doing the iPod Nano. ExamSoft is giving away 2 personal pocket safes. But the way it works is, there's always a hook, right? The way it works is you all have one of these pieces of paper, and as you visit vendors, they will generously provide you with a sticker to put on there after talking to you for 20 or 30 minutes about their products. And then at the end of the day on either Friday or Saturday morning, we'll put all these into a bucket. We'll pull them out as a raffle. But only the ones that have at least 7 stickers, which is all of them, will be eligible for victory. All right? There's no extra credit, by the way, for you nerds, if you get more than 7 stickers. I had somebody ask me that one. Is there extra credit? Ooh, okay. Today at lunch, Professor Clark Cunningham would like to invite you all to attend the Justice Education Initiative, JEI, Global Alliance for Justice Education, GAGE, sort of a planning informational meeting having to do with a conference that CALI is co-sponsoring in October, in December. If I just list all the months, I'll eventually get it right. In December, in the Philippines, Malaysia, Burma, Asia, on this planet. No, it's in the Philippines, right? And there's more information in the program book about that. Right? Program books? Program book. Did I forget anything on that? Nope, I didn't. Good. I'm getting organized. 18. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. When I was 13, that song really spoke to me. All right, I have a list of other people that I would like to thank. Point Link. These are our sponsors. Now, we don't just let any old mopes become sponsors of the CALI conference. We put them through a rigorous vetting process. We make sure their check's clear. No, seriously. We seriously, I'm sometimes asked by vendors that I think are inappropriate to be sponsors, and I turn them down. The check's didn't clear. And the point I always try to make to the vendors or to the sponsors is that they are part of our community. And I want them to attend the sessions, and I want them to put on not just this is a sales session or this is our product, because you can get information like that from websites or from brochures. This is an opportunity to engage, to do a dialogue with the very people that they sell their products to. And so all of these folks are generously supporting the conference, and we're delighted to have them. Point Link, Walters Kluwer, Aspen, thank you. B-Press, Berkeley Electronic Press, Corsival, B&A, thank you, B&A. Thompson West, this is in no particular order, by the way. If you librarians are saying, that's not alphabetical. Courtroom Connect, Exam for Integrity. LexisNexis, of course. Software Secure. Turning Technologies, the clicker folks. Examsoft. Echo 360, a.k.a. AnyStream. Hein Online, and I think there's one more? Nope, there's not one more. And that's our vendors, and I want you to show your appreciation by clapping for them right now. Now, I hate it when presenters use definitions to start a conference. So the definition of the word transformation I found to be quite interesting. The act or process of transforming, duh, right? State of being transformed. The one that, of course, I like the best is number 9, a wig or hairpiece for a woman. Don't go there, John. Okay. Or even a better one, theater, a seemingly miraculous change in the appearance of scenery or actors in view of the audience. That, to me, is legal education. Or at least that's IT in legal education, right? Because it's seemingly miraculous, the amount of work or the type of work that we do. But like in theater, like the theater staff, we are underappreciated, right? Okay. I didn't pay you guys enough, did I? All right. But anyhow, the theme of the conference is transforming legal education. And I got that, that idea just sort of popped out of my head one day when I was reading a book which had a title, Transforming Legal Education. And it was written by our plenary speaker, our keynote speaker, our opening keynote speaker, Paul Maharg. Now, Paul is a professor of law at the University of Strathclyde. I can't do the Scottish brogue. The University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. He's the mayor of Ardcalloch, and he'll explain what that means. And more than that, Paul is the only person to ever be a keynote twice at the CALI conference. So we're delighted to have him come and speak on this topic. And I'd like to welcome Paul up to the podium to talk. Let me get you set up. Let me get you done. There we go. And I'll get out of your way.
Okay, thanks very much, John. A real pleasure to be here, folks. Thanks very much, John, for the invitation. What I'd like to do is just very quickly start with some kind of, where I'm coming from, as it were, who I am and all the rest of it. And then we'll go into basically what I'll be talking about. If any of you can't understand what I'm saying, there's simultaneous translation, I think, available. I may sound like a character from The Simpsons, but actually, I do come from there, which is a little bit further north than there. Basically, I come from this institution here, which is like it's two graduate schools that are coming together. Quite important that, folks, because one of the kind of things I would talk about is the nature of collaboration and all the rest of it. As well as that, a kind of overview of the stuff we'll be talking about, well, that book effectively, because I really want you to buy the book. Signature Pedagogy, an interesting idea from another book that's written. Oh, sorry. Test. All right. Test. Yeah. Oh, technology, don't you love it? Okay, signature pedagogy. From another book that was published in 2007, which is called which is not called Transforming Legal Education, but is really about the same sort of thing, and basically was put together by the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning. We'll look at something called transactional learning, and we'll look at something called simple, simulated professional learning environment, and then we'll look at something to do with the future. Book outline, we don't have to bother about the first two parts, but the third part is really about, of the book is really about IT itself, and IT and legal education in particular. First couple of chapters are looking at simulation, and basically how we can actually use simulation in our law school teaching and learning. And how we can do it with the least pain as well, because simulation, as you probably understand, can be quite heavy on time and money. And then basically in chapters 8 and 9 we're looking at multimedia, we're looking at basically how to do transactions in a simulation environment. And then I take these 4 ideas at the end: experience, ethics, technology and collaboration. Those are the 4, really the kind of 4 key ideas that are embedded within the general themes of the book here. It's all about transforming. I don't know about you, but certainly my legal education was characterized more by boredom and terror than anything else. And I just don't think that should be the way that it ought to be. And I think that we can do things differently as well. So basically looking at these ideas here very quickly, and in particular imagining what the future could be. But the future is also kind of embedded in the past there, and there's a quite interesting lesson, I think, that we can learn from a moment in the 1920s in Columbia University. Because at the time when Dean Stone was carrying out the reforms there with the realists in the 1920s, we had 2 characters that came on the scene there and were used in very different ways by the law school. We had this guy here. Any instructional designers in the room? Know who this guy is? Thorndike, yeah. And we had this guy here. You probably know who he is. John Dewey. Both of them at Teachers College in Columbia, and they were called in by the law school to do various things. What's interesting about them is that both of them are kind of on then in the 1920s, the progressive wing of education. School education as well as higher education in the States. But what's also very interesting about them is that, as Ellen Lageman points out, there is a quite striking difference in the way that these 2 people approached educational practice. And I think that, well, it's quite a controversial statement that Ellen is actually making. I think it's a really interesting one. Okay, why is that the case? Well, if you look at it just very quickly, you can begin to see just how Thorndike, who is an educational psychologist, differs from John Dewey, the philosopher, the educationalist. Dewey was called in to basically look at how law was taught, to look at how law could be taught differently. Thorndike, quite different, theoretician, experimentalist, brilliant experimentalist as well. And as you can see, a lot of the kind of science of educational theory is based on the work that he did early in the 20th century. But there's 2 striking differences in their approaches here. That one there Thorndike, first of all, emphasized teaching strategies, whereas Dewey says, look at the ecology, look at the learning context, the environment, if you really want to understand what's going on in any particular learning situation. And that was the case for them then as it is for us now. Look at the standard classroom, 1908, you know. You have the kind of furniture, as it were, of education, the way it's laid out. Even kind of rows, boy, girl, and so on. You have the serried ranks of the desks. You have the children arrayed in front of the blackboard and so on. It's just kind of tailor-made for a teacher to stand in front and say, okay, children, open your books now, page 23, today we are going to, and so on. Teacher-led, teacher-dominated as well. Except in this photo, the teacher's at the back of the room there, you know, because I think he's probably looking after the troublemakers, which are sitting at the back of the room there or at the side. Okay, would you like to learn about measurement and volume this way, or would you like to learn about it this way? This is Dewey's lab school, in the grounds of Dewey's lab school in Chicago. The children are learning about measurement and volume by actually doing it, okay? They are building their little playhouse there, and they're also simultaneously having lessons inside it. Sounds like a health and safety nightmare to me, but you know, they are holding lessons inside as well on measurement and volume, so that the kids are measuring and they're wondering why some measurements don't work out and all the rest of it. There's people there to tell them why. There are 4 girls in the picture there on the sawing away and doing various things and so on. You just make him out as a boy there. He's been sent for more lumber and so on. Or would you like to learn about history and town planning this way compared to this way here? Again, Dewey's Lab School. What's really striking about this as well is that they're building kind of little models there, but at the same time they're analysing the models there, looking at, for example, the forms of chairs, which you can see just up here, which have been drawn out. And if you look really closely there, you're able to see that those chairs are the exact same chairs that are in the model there. They're also looking at the way that houses are laid out in this little box here. Notice the blackboard is completely empty. They're focusing on their work down there on the table, on that tabletop model. It's really interesting that, because it turns around the whole learning space that we saw earlier. And so transforming legal education has four key themes. Experience, first of all, law in the world. And law in the world is always going to be interdisciplinary. So we look at interdisciplinarity. We look at these trading zones, and I'll come to that phrase in a moment or two, bearing in mind John's definitions, etc. Creative, purposeful acts. Actually, those two things, I think, being creative and being purposeful, were the things that were lacking from my legal education, apart from being purposeful to pass exams. Of course, that was the key purpose for most of the stuff. Ethics was almost entirely missing from my undergraduate legal education, because in Scotland we have undergraduate, we have postgraduate split there. Postgraduate is professional, undergraduate is largely academic. We had almost no analysis of ethics in legal education, in legal practice, quite remarkable. There was also almost no collaboration between students. There was some between institutions, largely research-based, but certainly not teaching and learning-based. Between academic and professional learning, there's still that kind of divide there. Certainly in Scotland, though some of us are trying to make things better in that regard. There was almost no open access culture. And technology itself. What we need to do as far as technology is concerned is to grasp it really firmly and say, this is our discipline, this is our way of teaching and learning. We want technology which will actually enhance what we do in our discipline, rather than being given vanilla versions of bits and pieces of IT or whatever. We also want to basically make of that technology learner-centered technology, learner-centered control, and we also want to do something called transactional learning. What do I mean by trading zone? Well, effectively, a trading zone, as defined by this guy, Peter Gallison, wrote a really interesting book about the culture, the history of microphysics. How is it, he asked, a very simple question, how is it that at Princeton, for example, you can have these enormous great labs which are built? How were they built? There were the architects involved, there's civil engineers, there are instrument designers of all sorts, there are physicists becoming involved, experimental physicists, theoretical physicists. How did they all come together to do all of that? They basically shared, he said, content and method. They traded that in that particular small project there, gigantic project, made up of much smaller projects. Another thing that I'm talking about in these key themes, rhetorical models. I think we can learn an enormous amount from not only the communicational and the rhetorical movement, but also the research that's come out there. Some of you may have heard of these people here, James Stratman, Dorothy Deegan, Leah Christensen, and Elizabeth Mertz. Elizabeth Mertz has just published a book as well on legal writing, very interesting book. A lot of their research into how students actually write, and also how practitioners write as well, can be of use to us in legal education and in IT. And I'll be giving you an example of that towards the end of this talk. But in any case, what we really have to do is base what we are doing in terms of our teaching and learning on that kind of solid research. We've been doing some research of our own at the Glasgow Graduate School of Law. We have an approach we call transactional learning. Basically what we do is very simple, is take a transaction and use that as the basis of an entire class. Now, I'll show you an example of that in a moment or two, but let me just very quickly take you through the sorts of forms here, the forms of learning that we expect the students to do as they're going through the transaction. It's got to be active. It's got to be an authentic transaction as well. It's got to be as nearly what lawyers do in the world, rather than what academics may think the lawyers do. Because it's only by getting that kind of authenticity of performance that you can really begin to actually analyze what lawyers are doing in the world and bring that into the law school. So we're not talking about very kind of thin or short simulations. We're talking about maybe simulations or case studies or bits of multimedia or whatever that are really deep and that hold the complexity of law, as it were, as it's practiced. Reflection in and on learning, collaborative learning between students, process learning, and also embedding ethical standards there. Okay, let me turn to the other book, to the Carnegie Book. Quite remarkable book in lots of ways. I'm sure most of you have come across it. I think it's been about 4 or 5 conferences already since it's been published in the States, focusing on the future of legal education. I attended one in Georgia State University, Future Legal Education, organized by Clark Cunningham. Schulman's idea here, his idea of a signature pedagogy, lies actually at the heart of the book. The book's packed full of really interesting ideas, but this is one idea, I think, and it's specifically Schulman's idea, and I think it's really of interest to us and really of value to us as legal educators. What Schulman says is that every profession has its recognized way of teaching and learning whatever that discipline or profession does. In law, for example, he would say it's the case method. So in the States, the case method is played out in many different varieties in many different law schools, but it has a set of features, as it were, which are recognizable, as it were. So what he does in the book is he analyzes it, looking at 16 different law schools, and he comes up with a number of conclusions about that. But he also says, and it's very interesting here, that the kind of feature set of a signature pedagogy, rounds, for example, in medical education is another example. The feature set is that, first of all, it has a surface structure, observable behavioral features. Then below that, it's got a kind of a deep structure, underlying intentions, the rationale, and so on. But it also has, top right there, a tacit structure, which is generally kind of just not talked about because it's so much implicit in the method. And the method itself actually has values, dispositions built into it, which are unquestioned. I think if we're thinking about the case method, then we can see that's certainly so. But, and this is what's really interesting about Schulman's approach, Schulman says there is nearly always a shadow structure there. And the shadow structure is effectively the absent pedagogy, which is either not there at all or only weakly engaged. Really interesting that. It's like a silent pedagogy which is struggling to appear, as it were, but can't appear because of the dominance of that signature pedagogy, which is stamping its mark on law school practice and also on students as they go through, as they become practitioners, so that they think, well, the case method, that's what we do, that's what legal education is all about. And it kind of shuts down the options to considering any alternatives there. Okay, if we put the 4 key themes of transforming legal education there, and if we put that side by side with Schulman's ideas about signature pedagogy, then we can see some interesting things coming out. Because first of all, experience is very much like the surface structure there. The tacit structure, those values and dispositions, are indeed what's missing, certainly from legal education, undergraduate legal education, and we could do a lot more in postgrad as well, in Scotland. And it may well be the case that that's so, and it's certainly been part of the literature, the critical literature, in the States too. If we look at the shadow structure, the pedagogy that's absent, Well, certainly it's the case for us in Scotland that traditionally we have not done a lot about collaboration between students, between institutions and so on. We give students these little silos of courses called modules or subjects or whatever. We induct them into our law schools, which are slightly larger silos, you know, and then we induct them into a profession which is a large silo, but, you know, doesn't tend to have too many connections with other professions here. Finally, if we overlap technology onto deep structure, that may seem the most controversial kind of point, but I actually think, and remember thinking back to those pictures I showed you of the standard classroom in 1908, how the standard classroom, the layout of the space, just effectively gave you as a teacher, the imprimatur to teach in that particular way. Our technology is really based upon our deep structure, the underlying intentions and rationale. And it's my question to you, as it is constantly to my colleagues in Scotland, indeed wherever I go, is that really what we want? Are the ways that we are teaching and learning at the moment really what we want to do with technology in our teaching and learning? Or are we using technology just because it happens to be there, or because somebody else has said, you know, use it, or whatever? Okay, let me give you an example now of some of the things that I've been talking about, and in particular those four key themes of the book. Simple, simulated professional learning environment. Why simulations? Why have we kind of lighted on this in the work of the Glasgow Graduate School of Law? For all these reasons here. Close to the world of practice, enable students to practice legal transactions, facilitate a wide variety of assessments, gets out from the kind of closed book or the open book examination, so that you can actually do a lot more in terms of assessment of skills and values and attitudes and so on. Perhaps most of all, it encourages collaborative learning, and students begin to see the potential for that C in ICT, the communication, the communicational aspect of technology in law school. Okay, what is simple? Well, basically, on one level, it's a 2-year project. We were funded by the Joint Information Systems Committee, UK Centre for Legal Education, who's also a partner in the project, and it ends next month. So for the last 2 years, we have been designing for students an open source online simulation environment. And for staff, we've been developing the software tools so that they can design and build the simulations and collate all of the resources that are required for the particular simulations. The general aim of the platform is really these points here in italics. Personalized learning, yes, very much so. Students learn in totally different ways. We don't need to go into learning styles or anything just to appreciate that, but what we do need to be able to do is to give students different ways, as it were, into learning the profession. Social presence, collaborative learning that I've talked about already. We also want to give them rich media so that they're actually in simulations using or interacting with video, graphics, text, comms. And we also want to embed the design of authentic transactions, no matter what those are. But authenticity is not just about law. Actually, when you're using a simulation engine, it really begins to open up teaching and learning, because you can use it with different professions, different professional practice as well. And this is really what we've been doing in our work in this project here. Because you can see here that there's quite a few kind of LLBs there, the law, undergraduate law programs from various universities that we've been working with. We've also been working with partners in Strathclyde and other disciplines, architecture, management science and social work. They've been running simulations using Simple as well. And finally, we have our 5 projects in Strathclyde University in our postgraduate program, the Diploma in Legal Practice, which students have to do once they've done their LLB, their undergraduate law degree, if they want to become solicitors or advocates in Scotland. So we're running a fair amount of simulations there, but at the same time, we're also working with other people to help them develop in other disciplines, to help them develop their simulations as well. What, in other words, we're trying to do is to help others in various other departments explore simulation as a transformational tool. In other words, a completely different way of teaching and learning there. Taking the initial idea, putting it through a scenario and into the computer simulation. One of the tools, which if you're interested in taking this further, you can see a bit later, it's called the narrative event diagram, where we take the narrative of whatever the professional transaction happens to be, an architect building a building, meeting a client, dealing with a contractor, whatever, and we begin to plot it out, almost like a kind of piece of music on a musical stave, so that there are various kind of document exchanges between characters and so on. By doing so, we create a blueprint, and the blueprint itself allows for highly structured, closed boundary simulations, or entirely open field simulations there. What we're trying to do is effectively give staff the tools here to create these transactions that they want to create. What we need, if we're going to challenge the signature pedagogy, and there is a signature pedagogy in the UK as much as there is in the States here, what we need to do is obtain clear research evidence that the simulation environments will enable successful alternative approaches to knowledge, collaboration, professionalism, and all the rest of it. Now, that's really important for us. Already, the initial evaluation data shows us that, and it is only a kind of initial look at the evaluation data, so I wouldn't stress this too much at the moment, but it shows us that the students are learning better because they are working through simulations of whatever it is, in any of the disciplines that we have. But we also have to take that and take those approaches and take them to institutional management in our institutions, regulatory bodies, ABA, and so on. Okay, I've been talking about this environment, this simple environment. What does it actually look like? Okay. As its simple name says, it's just a very, very simple but deceptively simple environment that we have here. This is a firm. We divide our students into firms of 4. I'll go into that in a bit more detail, just how we arrange that sort of thing. But what we have here is a firm's virtual website, as it were. It's virtual office. Excuse me. We have on the left there, staff tools. The students don't see that. I'm logged in as a member of staff here. But effectively what we have underneath that are folders which the students can manage themselves. They have received, sent, and drafts as default. And this firm here, for example, have added notes to file, templates of minutes of meetings, and so on. So they're supporting the whole process of doing a transaction by adding the file structure, files in that folder structure there. What we have here is really the communicational evidence that the students have actually carried out a transaction. In this case, it's a personal injury transaction. And as you can see, there is a fair amount of work there that the students are actually doing. Each one of these is a piece of communication which has been received and which is answered, okay, as we go through that. In addition, a member of staff can also send stuff, whatever that stuff happens to be, whether it's video, text, graphics, whatever, as any one of a number of different characters. For example, I can send client photos. Okay, I'm going to download this rather than send it, but basically, if I click here, you'll be able to see the sort of photo that would be sent in the course of the personal injury transaction, which is all about an electrician who is working for the University of Ardcalloch. John referred to me as the mayor of Ardcalloch, and basically it's this virtual town on the web that we have. And this is a set of steps in the university. Bears striking resemblance to steps actually in the University of Strathclyde, oddly enough. But anyway. And if you look at counting the steps up, 1, 2, 3, 4th, the 4th steps, you'll see it's slightly higher than the others. Yeah. And that, of course, is where the electrician trips. He's carrying something, he falls down the steps, and he injures himself, and he claims against the university. And the students are either representing the injured electrician, or they are representing the insurers for the university, and they're carrying out that entire personal injury transaction there. It's quite interesting. We took this photograph about a bit over 3 years ago, And since then, there's been quite a bit of work done on these steps. I've noticed that. Handrails and all that kind of stuff. Okay. I'll come back to this later if you're interested in taking this further forward. But it gives you a sense of the transaction itself. Moving on very quickly. How is that personal injury negotiation project actually done? How is it put together? What are the resources? How is it played out? Well, very, very quickly on our course, we have 272 students. We divide them into firms of 4, so we've got 68 firms. I train postgrads, 8 postgrads, or what you might call adjunct faculty, to basically put together the resources and to send the resources, but only when they're asked for information. And they act as mentors as well for the students. Each of them has a kind of clump of maybe 8 or so firms to look after. That means putting together 68 document sets, 34 transactions. Actually, it's the same one. We always have an electrician who's falling down the steps. In every one of those transactions, you might say, well, come on, surely the students are actually going to be copying from each other and so on. Well, no, because what we do is we feed information through a document server so that each transaction is unique and different. Different names, different dates, different nature of the injury, and sometimes different witness statements as well. So what you actually find is that if you're running a simulation like this for over 200 students, is that the first couple of moves is like a chess match. First couple of moves are more or less the same, and then it just goes anywhere at all. And plagiarism, for example, is just not an issue as a result. Students have 12 weeks to achieve settlement. They must achieve settlement, so it's kind of like a pre-litigation negotiation that's going on here, folks. There is an introductory and there's a feedback lecture. There is no other recognizable class that goes on there. In other words, we don't have any further lecture courses on PI. We don't have any tutorials. We don't have any workshops, anything like that, with the exception of 2 things. We have discussion forums, and the students use the discussion forums a lot. I'll show you an example in a moment or two of how we use that. And we also give them the opportunity of voluntary face-to-face surgeries with a PI solicitor. And the surgery is just that. The students go there with a problem or an issue or something they want to discuss, but we tell our tutors who are in charge of that surgery that they're not there to take the students, as it were, through a discursive tutorial or give them mini lectures or anything like that. They're simply there to be silent until the students ask questions. It's that kind of surgery model which, as a support for simulation, works really well. Okay, PI, project assessment criteria. How do we assess this with the students? We don't give them learning outcomes because the students say, as you'll see in a moment, just how much they do learn from this. Instead, we say, we want bodies of evidence that you have actually gone through this whole process here. Fact-finding, professional legal research, formation of the negotiation strategy, and also performance of that strategy. In the process, they use the discussion forums. This is an example of the sort of question that students habitually ask on the discussion forums when they come across an issue that they, in the course of the transaction, they're not too sure about. Myself and a practitioner, Charlie Hennessy, we're on the forums pretty well constantly, so that effectively the students will get a response within 24 hours of posting there. This is a question from the PI defender, so they're acting for the insurers in the transaction. And it's quite an interesting question. It's almost like a kind of hypothetical, except it's not hypothetical because it's arising in the transaction. They must do something there. It's not something they can sit back. It's not that kind of cool thing that they can sit back and think, yes, now what would one do in these circumstances? And so they have got a problem here. They must solve it in some way or another. So they're asking there, what will we do? And Charlie comes back with his answer there. And I really like Charlie's answer, because, and Charlie is really good at this sort of thing, because first of all, he gives a straight answer. This is what you should be doing here. Excellent, because the student hasn't actually gone in there to do anything. The student has asked for feedback, or what, more accurately, feed forward before they go into the situation there. Charlie's given it to them. He said, you have no duty to report the accident to the health and safety executive. But then he goes on. And it's not a hypothetical that arises from an academic situation. It's a hypothetical that arises from what, as he couches it here, what the client might then do in the situation. Now, the PI mentors are reading this. I'm reading that, and I'm thinking, this is really interesting, because what if I, as the client, actually did go into the simulation and pitch up exactly as Charlie has said here, and give that sort of a problem to the students? How would they react then? Very interesting kind of answer, I think, that he's giving there. We can pull out statistics as well and match them one against the other. Total correspondence, and this is in 2000, 2001, and you can see that firm 7, for example, these are firm numbers in the horizontal as opposed to items of information on the vertical axis. You can see that firm 7 there, they win the prize. They've worked so hard. It's like 80 pieces of correspondence sent in the process of this transaction, and they also bankrupted the firm because they worked too hard. And you can see that their result, firms 7 and 8 at the bottom there, was by no means the best result as far as the sums of money that they achieved for their client was concerned. We can also pull out statistics about how the students are actually working over the course of the year. This is, in feedback terms, this is what the students are telling us that they learned from the PI project. That kind of fairly deep simulation that we have there. And in the other simulations that we have, it's more or less matched. We have one in civil procedure. We have 2 in conveyancing the sale of property, both a sale and a purchase, and also winding up the estate of a deceased client, what we call private client. And we also have one which runs throughout the whole course called practice management, where effectively we have practice tutors who are helping students through this whole process. This is an example of what students would have done differently. I love this quote at the start here, the second sentence. First mistake we made was an approach to the task as law students as opposed to lawyers. Tried to find the answer and work our way back, So they were kind of looking at the back of the book. What's the answer there? Oh, right, yeah, okay. What they have to do is work through the process, and that's precisely what we're trying to get them to do. And also the estimation to gather information. Students, and it's certainly, I don't know if it's the case here in the States, but the students get almost no practice in law school on fact gathering. This is something that's always handed to them on the plate. There is that kind of implicit assumption, that all the information that they need is there in the paper case study. But here they actually have to go out and get the information. They have to construct the case for themselves. And it's that process that they find very difficult, but also incredibly fascinating as well, as you can see here, because it's made up of all these skills. If they're going to get this information, such as letter writing, negotiation, time management, IT skills, conducting legal research, not academic research. Our students can write 2,000-word essays really well. They can write 10,000-word dissertations, but they can't write simple business letters. They can't write very simple little letters that will get the information precisely that they need. They very often can't do that without giving the audience a lecture on various bits of law. It's almost as if they're kind of mimicking what people have done to them throughout the course of their legal career. And effectively what all of this is, of course, folks, although it may not look like it, is actually a Web 2 application, isn't it? Because what we're talking about is that kind of interactivity, that kind of social software nature of the simulation that one finds very frequently in these Web 2 apps. If you take the kind of inner orange ring here, I would say that the qualities that you have here of usability, participation, convergence, remixability, standardization, design, and economy. Those are precisely the qualities that John Dewey would nod and say, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to be doing in Chicago laboratory schools with my kids there. It's precisely what we want to be doing in that kind of constructivist education where students actually construct the transaction for themselves. And what we have to do is effectively give students the tools and also staff the tools by which to create that scenario there. So important. One of the issues that people very often raise with us when I talk about these matters is, what about plagiarism? What about freeloading? How do you actually kind of deal with all of those issues? Well, actually, students are co-opted to community police plagiarism there for a very simple reason. they're doing this authentic client-based work, not assessment-led tasks. So they're actually working on behalf of clients. So what we're trying to do there is give them feed forward, and as a result, students take responsibility for their transaction, their files, their clients, their firm. Because, and some people just find this quite revolutionary, but to me it's pretty natural. We don't give individual students a mark. We give the firm the mark. Because it's the firm that either passes or fails in reality, as it were, if one of them effectively goes down and commits some really serious blunder. So they're all got to have that collective responsibility for the work that they produce within the firm. So it's okay for maybe for me to write a letter. I've got to get everybody's approval of that letter before it goes out. Because when it goes out, that's it fixed in the received file, in the sent file. And it's there for assessment. So what we're trying to do here, folks, is to encourage ownership of the learning process, not submission here. What we're trying to do is encourage collaboration, not plagiarism. But it means that staff have got to take responsibility for designing these authentic transactions, which is quite significant there. And it leads to kind of general ideas about plagiarism and freeloading and what student attitudes are when they're doing these sorts of things. Because I don't think we do enough of number 2 there. And we don't give them apprenticeship models. We don't give them that kind of situated learning and assessment enough. And very often, certainly in the UK, there tends to be not enough academic literacy support within disciplines so that students really know what they're supposed to be doing when they carry out various bits and pieces of research. The research that I cited earlier on rhetorical writing and so on, perfectly in point here. Leah Christensen's work, for example, shows that when you put students in the role of being one of the characters in a case, for example, they understand the case better than if they're just preparing as a student, preparing for a tutorial or a class or whatever. So we need to redesign the ecology of learning. Again, taking Dewey's term there, the trading zones, the rhetorical models, and so on. What we're trying to do, in other words, with Simple, because the Simple project is coming to an end, and what we're effectively doing is setting up a Simple foundation. And the foundation will move forward so that it's collaborative, staff, students, different institutions. We want different professions in that foundation as well. We want it to be international. We don't want it to be just playing out within Scotland. We're already doing that. We have a sister project in the Netherlands called Cyberdam or Cyberdam, and we've already arranged a joint project between business law students in the University of Rotterdam and our students. That was 2 years ago. And we're taking that further forward now so that we're using 2 simulation environments to do that across jurisdictional differences within the EU zone. But we can do it across entirely different zones in the world. Indeed, one of the things that we want to be able to do is work with institutions such as Global Alliance for Justice Education. We also want to be working with other forms of simulation as well. We're doing that, for example, with Franklin Pierce in New Hampshire at the moment, where some of us are training their standardized clients. Again, a kind of technology and approach is taken from medical education there. Lay people who effectively come in and assess interviewing skills in students on the Daniel Webster Scholars Program there. But we want to take that face-to-face simulation, as it were, and embed that within the online simulation environment that you've seen here, and put the 2 of them together. Quite fascinating, I think you'd agree, quite fascinating kind of convergence of simulation approaches and technologies there. We also want to organize the thing like the Mozilla Foundation, because I do believe that this is not, if it's institutionally based, it will go nowhere. It's got to be put out there, just like Web 2, so that effectively that piece of software can be used by as many people as possible. So what do we want to do in the future then? Well, actually we want to do more of what we're actually doing at the moment, but very often to be doing it better or to have more sophisticated functionality in the sort of thing that you have here. We have a map, for example, we have a directive for the virtual town. Well, we could do so much more with that kind of map. For example, our town is Ardcalloch. Ardcalloch sits on just a little kind of corner of the Clyde, as it were. It kind of is like Brigadoon, you know? It kind of appears and it disappears and all the rest of it. Well, that's all very well, but supposing you take Glasgow. Supposing you take Glasgow as represented by Google Maps, Google Earth, yeah? And you begin to lay over that transparent layers of data on particular houses, so that, for example, if we were going into in conveyancing or real estate, we were selling number 55 Acacia Avenue. Well, if we're selling number 55 Acacia Avenue and it's a real place in Glasgow, that causes problems for the people who are living in 55 Acacia Avenue, or could. So we lay over that, as it were, data, layers of data, which make of that a fictional place while retaining the actual sense of the real place. We could also develop the variety of communicational media between students and simulation characters and staff. For example, those standardized clients that I was talking to you about earlier, how are they going to communicate with their students in the process of a transaction? Are they always going to be kind of, you know, chuntering away at a keyboard? God, I almost did that there. No, of course not. They're going to use a Skype phone. So they're going to use a Skype phone to be in touch with the client all the time through the transaction. That makes the transaction much more realistic for the characters. Design more functionality in terms of 3D. We're already investigating other engines rather than Second Life. We're investigating things like Forterra, for example, which would give us that simulation of the 3D world, which is much more important for some disciplines than it is for others. In law, we have a heavily textual discipline, but for architecture, for example, they would want some kind of a 3D environment, or civil engineering, where they would actually look at a bridge, as it were, in great detail, and look at the design of the bridge. One last example before I end. Legal writing in our diploma program, which you'll remember is a postgrad program, so students have done 2, 3, or 4 years of law, depending on the route that they come through. And basically what they do is they have to kind of do this bridge program before they go into 2 years, as it were, of traineeship. We try to regard writing, as well as the individual writing they do, as a kind of social activity, which emphasizes networks of meaning, distributed content, and so on. And that's really important because basically I think we're still focused on this sort of stuff here. From about 2006 we've moved, but we've not moved far enough. Organizations, products, content, snapshot assessment is still what we do with technology. And I think that from 2010 onwards we really ought to be looking at this sort of stuff here. Taking the lead from MIT, Open Courseware Initiative, or from the Open University in the UK. Taking the lead also on web-based aggregated content, pulling that into our simulations and transactions. We also ought to be looking at e-learning as understanding, conversation, and also assessment of that situated learning. Now, three years or so ago, we had a little project with our students. Basically, they wrote client bulletins, and then they uploaded the client bulletins, as it were, on the web. And some of them were pretty good, actually, and you would read that as a client and say, yeah, that takes my understanding of this little bit of employment law that bit further. Or in others, you'd look at it and you'd say, after the first couple of sentences, my God, this is a 2,000-word essay that's been compressed into like 300 words or whatever. You know, so there was a fair bit of work to be done there, telling students and showing them how to write not only client-oriented writing, but also how to write for the web. So what we did was we've taken this little project which we ran, which had reasonable success insofar as it was a kind of fixed web page. As you'll probably see, this is SharePoint that we were using as a kind of content management system here. And we were taking the Ardcalloch Legal Information Advice Service, alias for short, and what we're going to be doing is making it a much more dynamic environment in the coming year. What we're doing effectively is simulating the professional writing context much more, so that students using wikis within that content environment system that you saw there, what students will be doing is they'll be able to see each other's drafts, and that's really important, which is the collaborative learning aspect of the 4 key features of the book that I was talking about earlier. They'll be able to amend the firm's drafts, collaborative working with each other. They'll be responsible for individual articles, the ownership of learning. And in addition, staff will be able to see, because you can look at it in the history of the wiki. Staff will be able to see student drafts, comment on the drafts as well. And we'll bring in professional legal writers too, so that the writers will be able to comment on the work that the students are doing. Now that's one example of using a kind of simulation environment, Ardcalloch, of using simple, but also linking it up with the research that Christensen, that Deegan, that Mertz, new legal realism project and so on, is coming out and actually showing that this sort of thing really does work. This kind of simulation, as it were, of legal tasks does actually work. Coming to an end of what I'm going to be saying here now, folks. I hope it's been useful. I hope it's given you a sense of basically what we're trying to do in the GGSL. We can take ideas forward even within these 2 days in a couple of ways. If you want to take this further forward, I'd be most happy to be talking to anyone at all, really, from law schools who are interested. Because, as I said, one of the things we want to do is to internationalize this particular approach and this foundation. We've already got notes of interest and people doing things in Japan, for example, Taiwan, Hong Kong, 3 Australian law schools as well, and as I say, as I've said, people in the Netherlands. In fact, there's another project member who's actually today talking in Poland to Polish law schools who are really interested in, obviously, in the whole kind of legal regulation, legal environment, and the democratic issues that arise from that. And of course, legal education plays a key role in that. So there's a kind of international, an international kind of context to this, which is really important. You'll find more information on the poster, which is at the door there. This is what it looks like here. And these are the contact details here, if you want more information. We have a project page up until July there, which is at the JISC, the Joint Information Services Committee website. And as from July, that's next month, we'll be at the Simple Foundation website, which is there. I think that's me. I think that's all I have to say today. Thank you very much, folks, for listening. It's been a great audience. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Time for some questions? A couple of questions? Question over there? Oh, stretching. Question down there?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Let me repeat. I can repeat the question. How are you structuring courses? Do you have several simulations per course, or?
Yeah, the simulations are mandatory, and they're attached to courses. We organize them slightly differently, but effectively, for example, in the civil procedure course, which we have, what we do is we give, in that particular course, we give the students tutorials, but our lecture series is now ported over to webcast, soon to be podcast and webcast. But the simulation is the kind of the linchpin of the whole course. And this is what's really interesting about simulation, folks. That when you do use it, you find it becomes a linchpin for everything else, because students are drawn to the simulation. They really like working in it because it gives that sense of realia, you know, of actually working through. And what's really interesting about it is that you plan the resources around the simulation. So the tutorials are really resources for the simulation. The online resources too, the books, the handouts, and all the rest of the usual kind of furniture of legal education all begin to kind of circle around the linchpin of the course, which is a transaction, rather than being a race, rather than being a 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 like that until the end, and you've got your 2-hour examination or whatever. And students are progressively kind of cramming as they get close to that. They can't cram a simulation. You can't do that. You know, you can't do it in the last week or so. You've really got to kind of work through it. But you've got to give the students the resources to be able to find out about things as they go. Does that answer? Yeah.
Question? Go ahead. Question was, is this something you start immediately with students, or do you start off with some foundation or some introductory materials? Fair enough?
Yeah, good question. As far as the kind of knowledge of substantive law is concerned, we can kind of assume that students have that from their undergraduate career. But in certain respects, they find it really difficult because transfer of learning is always difficult. And students have, you know, as students do, you know, we've all done it. We've sat through lecture courses, we've read the books and so on, we've crammed for the exams, and then 2 days later, if you ask us what that was all about, well, you know, it's that cramming process which is so reductive of knowledge in lots of ways. But we have to assume that our students have that, so that they can pull it out of the archive, as it were, when needed. But the thing that we find most difficult for our students is that they're socialized into thinking of law as merely a kind of knowledge-based set of rules. You know, it's like the old-style medical students, you know, who are going through a course of 3 years of medicine, basically treating patients as corpses, you know. And that's one of the things that, for example, problem-based learning, which starts at year 1 in medical school, is there to prevent, is there to overcome. Similarly, what we have to do on our course is actually induct students into professional legal skills. So we have a foundation course at the start. Last 2 weeks, it's a kind of quick and dirty way of getting the students into practice, thinking about practice, or thinking about law from a practice orientation, as it were. And what we do there is a kind of tell, show, do structure. So we give them a kind of general idea of what we want them to do, for example, in legal writing. They then have little kind of exemplars, and they work through various stuff. And then we set them a project at the end. What we do, for example, now, as far as simulation is concerned, is that once they've worked through cycles of legal writing, legal drafting, negotiation, interviewing skills, and also professional legal research as opposed to academic legal research, once they've worked their way through cycles of tell, show, do in each of these through the 2 weeks, we then set them a 2-day simulation in which what they have to do is work through a number of aspects of this simulation, respond to the client, write letters to the client. Sometimes the client will respond or whatever. Now, what's fascinating about that is that simulation is used in a really kind of concertinaed way, really focused way, so that they get to know, A, how all these skills are being put together in one simulation, but also how a simulation itself will work before they go into the much longer, more languid almost simulation in PI, which lasts for 12 weeks. And this is almost like a kind of matter of pacing as anything else.
So you could build a short simulation to get them used to simulations.
Precisely.
Then you make them run through a longer one.
Then you make them run through a longer one. But what we then do is, considering that whole idea of pacing, which is really important, what we do is, before they finish the PI transaction, the 12-week, we then start another one, which is slightly faster. Private client, winding up the estate of a deceased client. We then hit them with one which is faster again, civil court, and then conveyancing around the same time, which is very, very fast. The document exchange every couple of days or so. So that eventually they get the sense of not just working through a simulation, because what lawyer just works on one case at a time, but they're also working on a number of stacked up cases, and they're having to deal with all of that as they work through. Now, you can't plunge students into that. It's just cognitive overload is way too difficult for them. But what you can do is you can build up, you can ramp up the process of learning, so that by the time they come to the end of the diploma course, they ought to be able to go into an office and pick up a file in conveyancing, a private client, whatever, and say, yeah, I know what stage we're at with that, and here's what I would do next.
One more question.
Sure.
Thank you. I was going to say, Paul, Karen Barton, and Pat McKellar will be at a session right after this, in which they'll talk about just how difficult or easy it is for a faculty member to both construct a simulation. Actually, you call them blueprints.
Yeah. To
construct a blueprint or a template. That's how I think of them, but a blueprint, and how to run them. So, what is the investment in time and effort from the faculty viewpoint? And I think we're done. Thank you very much. See you all later.
Is that okay?